Thank you for watching. We're back with Courtney Weaks. She's a candidate for Metro Court, Division 4.
Yes.
Right? Always try to remember the division, because when, especially if it's a case where your name is on the ballot and they need to know what division you're in. We try to get that across there. So we're talking about the jury selection process and how it's done and stuff. 6 individuals, and then you said it's
in Metro Court,
Metro Court, a lot easier. You work with defense and prosecution, right? Both?
So when I graduated, I went to University of New Mexico for law school, and I did a clinical program while I was there where I worked at the district attorney's office. And I was very interested when I was in law school in criminal procedure and all of those courses. So I knew that I really wanted to be part
As part of your law school? That's the first
part?
Yeah,
that was the first part. And so I actually got to work at the district attorney's office prosecuting actual cases. And they, the
Is
program.
Is your first year of law? Or
this
second?
was my 3rd year, actually.
Oh, okay.
So almost
you're
right before I
graduating.
was done. And they had changed the program, so there was, I think, 12 people in the program, and 6 of them went to the public defender, and 6 of them went to the DA. And it just so happened, I actually kind of thought I was going to be more defense-minded going into it. But when I went to the DA's office, I had met a lot of really bright attorneys that I was working with. And in particular, the attorney that kind of was shadowing me, it was kind of, into the frying pan. She really gave me the files and made me do the trials on my own. And it was really exciting, and I really loved the office. So that was where I knew I wanted to go when I finished law school.
So you went right into the courtroom and...
Absolutely.
Wow.
And the other...
I didn't realize they did that.
The other great thing about being a district attorney that I think is interesting is you get to meet a lot of the members of the criminal defense bar. So you're doing trials with, some very prominent criminal defense attorneys in town. So it's a really great place to kind of, like I said, it moves fast, so you really learn evidence very quickly. You learn how to do trials very quickly. It's a steep learning curve, but it's a lot of fun.
So what was that like, first time in front of the judge and the whole...
So I have in front of Judge Allweiss, I remember it being very nervous, but you get over it pretty quickly. But yeah, I remember
because that's
being
what you
young...
wanted to do, so obviously you're
Absolutely.
there. But then, most people don't realize, going in front of a judge is a pretty intimidating thing.
It absolutely is.
Because it's a very serious environment. It's not something that, you see. And most people have that intimidation factor.
And you have to be relaxed enough to, when you're doing direct examinations or cross-examinations, you have to be relaxed enough to actually pay attention and listen to.
So they let you do direct cross, everything?
Absolutely. Well, when I was in law school, yeah. And then when I started the district attorneys, like I said, it's a pretty steep learning curve. They, give you an attorney to shadow for a couple weeks, and then you're going to court with your, 13 files to run your own criminal docket in the morning. So it's intense, but it's a lot of fun. You know what?
I did not know you were allowed to do that. I didn't even know the system allowed that, where you could come in there without going through the bar.
Oh no, I still
because this is just before graduation, right? Or
no,
just
and then
when
I was in law school, I had a supervising attorney through the clinical program that was monitoring me, and the rules do allow for that, where as a law student you can practice before the judge. The judge has to approve it through an order. And then before I started actually at the DA's office, I sat for the New Mexico bar exam. And started at the DA's office as a regular attorney at that point.
And the judges, I think, know that you're coming in there as kind of a freshman, but
absolutely,
you're not,
yeah. So and they've
they
a lot
you're
of
not a seasoned veteran at that point.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, so they know you'll make. So you went through that process pretty well, and then you move forward into, and you did both. You said, right?
Right. So at the district attorney's office, besides Metro, I also worked in the felony DWI division. So I prosecuted subsequent DWI offenses. And
what was that like? Doing DWIs. So we have an epidemic in this state.
You know what, we do, and I mean, that's an interesting, it's really I worked on vehicular homicide cases and great bodily injury cases, so those are extremely difficult crimes. It's a very difficult crime to deal with, and a lot of times the vehicular homicides are extremely sad, especially when you're working in a situation where the person who, there's sometimes a person killed their own wife or their own family member. Mm-hmm. So they're some of the hardest cases to deal with, and when you get to that level, it's absolutely about, I think.
So what's the statute say if you, God forbid, someone killed one of their family members?
So the maximum penalty for vehicular homicide as a result of DWI is actually 6 years, or leaving the scene of an accident is
Does it change with your own family member?
No.
So it doesn't affect
It's just,
it as
yeah,
well?
the maximum is 6 years of 6 years in prison is the maximum sentence that you can serve.
So there is no degree of change there as far as your family member and a stranger, right?
No, there's not, but it's an interesting, it's a very, like I said, those are very difficult cases to work with. They're extremely sad.
Gruesome details and stuff.
And
Yeah, there's a lot of
they're sad,
details
gruesome
there.
cases, but it's important work to do, and it's, you know, it was important work that I was very proud to do, to feel like I was, you know, keeping our community safe.
Eventually, I think you kind of build that whole, I think, the bubble there around you. You build that whole way of dealing with it, because this is not easy to deal with in real life. You
No,
know,
absolutely.
I mean, if I went in there, start dealing with DWI, I could probably have a panic attack, you know, at some point, because, you know, you're hearing a lot of gruesome details there.
Right.
What happened to the family? Sometimes they're dismembered and things like that.
Right.
I recall a few years back, a person went and killed the whole family.
Right.
Going up to Santa Fe, he came out of the airport, and yeah, I'm not mentioning names here, but then it was the airline was responsible, all that. These are difficult cases, but we have an epidemic in the state of DWI. So I was
That's
just
true.
asking, how was it dealing with so many, or did you feel like it was just kind of business as usual for the court?
You know, so when you're dealing with the felony level, I mean, in district court, they deal with all kinds of cases, and so those criminal dockets go everywhere from murder cases, first-degree murder cases, to, you know, very serious child abuse cases, to, you know, these felony DWIs. And I think, you know, like I said, my focus as a prosecutor enforcing the law was, you know, safety to our community and making sure that those people didn't reoffend. And there were, you know, depending on the situation, there is alternative programming available, such as drug court and other programming, so people can, you know, find a way to finally become sober and find, you know, the abilities and the tools that they need.
There's a lot of rehabilitation. I
There
think
is
they're
a lot
given
of
classes and
rehabilitation.
things like that, right?
Yes.
And they have to adhere to those classes, community service in some cases, I think. First offense in DWI, it's always
Statutorily, so I think that the system is absolutely set up for your first DWI offense. Statutorily, it's what is collectively or kind of through the community called the First Offenders Program, where it is 24 hours of community service. There's a DWI school, and you also have to attend a victim impact panel, which is a movie that Mothers Against Drunk Driving puts on, and it's also live people speaking about the impacts, and it's people who have lost their family members in DWI crashes. So, and then you also have to be, there's a component statutorily where you're screened for, you have to do take a test essentially, and you're screened for whether or not you have to do additional programming. And then if they find that if you're screened and they find that you need help, then they can make you do additional AA classes or some other counseling, substance abuse programming. So it's absolutely, in Metro Court for first offenses, it's absolutely geared and at people trying to, you know, say that, you know, this is a big deal, but we want to be able to give you the resources to be able to figure out how this never happens again.
We do have a lot of repeat offenders in this state, and I think
That's
the
true.
system is working, but do you feel there's something that needs to be adjusted by the system? I'm talking about the judicial. Not that I don't want you to
No,
criticize any
absolutely.
particular point.
No.
But was it something we could reform in some ways?
You know, I think that for first offenders, I absolutely think that, you know, I think that is an effective way. The First Offenders Program is good, and we have things like interlock programs, so we ensure that, you know, people actually lose their privilege to drive unless they have the interlock installed on their car for a year. So, and that I think is extremely stigmatizing, and that in and of itself gives a lot of motivation to people. And with the repeat offenders, I think that what judges need to do and what I need to do as a judge is, you know, for a DWI first offense, you only have 90 days hanging over somebody's head and up to a year of probation.
Okay.
So that's a limited amount of time. And I really think it's important that we focus on those people if they're not getting it, if they can't stay sober, if they're on probation and they're drinking, if they're picking up new charges, that's when the system really needs to step in and say, you know, you need to take this more seriously, and we need to maximize your penalty so you understand. That's the only way that you're going to understand that you can't do this anymore.
Interesting aspects to it. I would like to know what attorneys think about the system and stuff, the current system. We take another break. We'll come back. We'll talk a little bit more. Okay, that's
Okay,
our last
thank you.
segment there. We'll take a short break. We'll be back.